Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 388. This is the last podcast episode of the year. And this is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm going to talk about how to give yourself credit for what you've achieved this year. Even if it feels like you haven't done much, even if it feels like you haven't achieved much, even if it feels like you haven't had all the adventures you wanted to have. This was a rough year. So in this episode, you will learn why it's so important to give yourself credit, how to give yourself credit for what you achieved in 2020. I'm going to talk a little bit about perfectionism, and then practical things you can do to actually give yourself credit and to kind of make the process easier as we move into the new year. And I think this is really important. I originally was planning to talk today for this episode about planning your new year, because of course I've just released my planner, The Year You Want, and I talked last week about how to wrap up the current year before you plan the new year. But I think this year, it's really important for me to talk about this because 2020 was such a weird year, and 2021 is not looking like it's getting back to normal. It's still uncertain and strange, and things are still getting canceled, and so it's important to talk about this. But before we get into today's episode, I wanted to give a huge thank you to Marie, a new patron, and thank you so much for signing up. I really appreciate your support. And I would also love for you to join me on Patreon. If you get value from this podcast, make sure you head over to Patreon and check that out. You can support me and make sure that this podcast can continue production. If you head over to patreon.com/Holly Worton, that's patreon.com/Holly Worton, you can join me there. Membership starts at just $1 a month. And this month, I'm actually giving away the ebook for The Year You Want to all of my patrons. So normally my patrons at the $11 a month and above levels get all of my ebooks included. But I've decided to do that as a special holiday gift to all of my patrons. So if you sign up at $1 a month, you will get that. So without further ado, let's move into today's episode. So, 2020. It was a rough year. And I think probably no one had the year they thought they would have when we started out in January. I know I've talked about how to reevaluate your plans and your goals, and that's a really, I think, useful companion episode to this one, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But I think it goes beyond that. It goes beyond just having to adjust our goals and plans and come up with plan B and C and D and E. I think we need to give ourselves credit for what we did achieve, even if all you did, and I'm saying that with air quotes, was just again with air quotes, survive and make it to today. A lot of people had a really rough time this year, and I think as the year went on, I found it easier, but I find it really difficult to deal with uncertainty. And I had some rough times at the very beginning of our first lockdown here in the UK. And I think I forget that because this weird year has kind of become the new normal and I'm used to it, even though it's still a bit rocky and things are still getting canceled for January and beyond. So give yourself credit. Why is it important to give yourself credit and what does that mean? So to me, giving yourself credit shifts your focus from putting yourself down and feeling bad about yourself to lifting yourself up and feeling good about yourself. Give yourself credit for what you achieved in 2020, even if it wasn't what you planned, even if it wasn't what you hoped for, even if you couldn't do what you wanted, even if you couldn't travel to all the places you wanted, even if you couldn't have the adventures you wanted. And again, even if all you did, in air quotes, was survive and make it to today, you're here, you're listening to this. Maybe you're still having a rough time, but you're here. And that is an achievement in such a weird year. I mean, it's always an achievement, but it's a special achievement in this year where things have just been absolutely unprecedented. So I think a lot of people sometimes have the tendency to be perfectionists. You know, it is what it is, but we wish it were better. We feel like it's not good enough. And maybe your year could have been better. Maybe you could have taken better advantage of the situation. But it is what it is. You did what you could, and you did the best that you could with the tools and the resources you had throughout this year. And I think this is an important perspective to have. It's one of the NLP presuppositions. I can't remember exactly the wording for it, but it's basically everyone's doing the best they can at any given time with the resources they have available for them. So think about that. Maybe it could have been better. Maybe you wish it had been better, but it is what it is and you did the best that you could. And that's all you can ever do. And so it's really important to just accept what is and accept that what happened is good enough and accept that you are good enough. And I know when I was a business mindset coach, that was one of the biggest topics that came up over and over again with the entrepreneurs that I worked with. So many times I found myself balancing with them for the belief, I am good enough. I am good enough just as I am right now today. I am good enough. And I think that's a belief that no matter whether you're a business owner or not, it's a very important belief to have. So maybe the year could have been better, maybe you could have done more, but you did what you did, and it's good enough. It's good enough. Accept what is, and give yourself credit for what you did manage to achieve. So I think it's really easy to just sit here and say, give yourself credit. But what does that mean? Like, how do you actually give yourself credit? I think there are a few different things you could do, and I'm going to talk about them now, and you might want to make notes or just, pick and choose some of the things that feel right for you, or just pick one thing. But again, do what feels right for you. Not all of these things are going to feel right for you, or maybe they all will and you can do them all. But I think giving yourself credit starts with being kind to yourself. And that goes back to what I was just saying, accepting that you did the best that you could throughout the year with the resources you had available to you. You did your best. And yes, sometimes we wish our best would have been better than it was, but it was the best. So be kind to yourself and just accept that it is what it is. You did what you did. You did the best you could. And just be compassionate to yourself. I think so often it's so easy for us to be compassionate to other people and to be kind to other people, but inside we're beating ourselves up. And it could be our mind gremlins, our limiting beliefs, or it could be just our negative self-talk. It's so easy to beat ourselves up for not being good enough. And that leads me into my next thing. Know that you are good enough, just as you are. You're good enough, period. Can you grow? Is personal growth important? That's super important to me. I am always looking at growing and improving and learning from my mistakes. But today, I'm good enough. Do I want to get better at certain things? Yes. Do I want to improve? Yes. But today, I am good enough. And that has been one of the biggest mindset shifts for me. And it's one of those things where, when I talked about mindset a lot, I used to talk about going up the spiral staircase and you would take one step was your mindset work and one step was your practical action and you would go up the staircase. But every once in a while you would kind of hit a new level of the same mindset stuff that you were working on, a week, a month, or a few months ago. So I am good enough may look different now than it does a year from now, and it may look different now from what it did a year ago. So your version of good enough will be changing, but having that deep knowledge that you are good enough is really, really powerful. And it's a huge mindset shift, and it will really help to prevent self-sabotage. So to dip a little bit into mindset work, I used to work with a technique called Psych K, which I will mention in the show notes and link to. You can use that. You can use NLP. Psych K is really great because you create belief statements, which are kind of like affirmations, and you work with a facilitator or you can do it yourself if you train in the technique, to program that belief into your subconscious. So unlike affirmations where you have to say them over and over again every day, hundreds, thousands of times over the course of days and weeks, you just do it for about 3 to 5 minutes and it makes the shift. Again, as you grow, you might hit a new level of self-sabotage or limiting beliefs, and you might need to reprogram that belief differently, but you'll be coming at it from a different perspective. That 3 to 5 minutes of work will make huge changes. So again, I highly recommend Psych K. I also really like NLP. I've mentioned several times that I trained in NLP years ago, never used it with clients, but I've lately been seeing an NLP practitioner, and it's been super, super useful. So find what works for you. Tapping might also work for you. I've worked with my friend Cara Wild many times she uses EFT a lot with clients, and that's been really, really helpful. Really useful to actually see someone who is trained in EFT, because the way they approach it is kind of different from how you do it if you just do kind of pre-written scripts that you find on YouTube. Those are great. Those are better than nothing. But I really find that working with someone is important because they help personalize it to you and whatever your personal flavor of not good enough is. And they can help you get to the root of that belief. So know that you are good enough just as you are right now, today, and do the mindset work that you need to do to believe that at that deep subconscious level. Celebrate your wins. This is something that I mention a lot in my book, The Year You Want, because I think it's important to celebrate your successes, and I often forget to do so. You know, I've worked on so many books this year. I've published so many books. And do I celebrate every time I publish one? No. And I should, because I think it would be very motivating, and I think it would help me to recognize my achievements. So I'm telling you this because it's also something that I think I could benefit from doing more. And that's why I've included my book, The Year You Want, because I need to remind myself. So celebrate your wins, celebrate your successes. Again, even if it's just, within air quotes, surviving 2020 and just being here today. That alone is an achievement. Celebrate your successes, your wins, whatever you want to call them, no matter how big or how small. So I'm really pleased with how I was able to come up with new plans for this year. I was supposed to walk the Camino twice. I was supposed to walk the Camino Portugués in March, and I was supposed to walk the Camino Inglés in September or October. I didn't do either of those. What did I do instead? I did the Ridgeway. We had kind of that break between lockdowns here in the UK. I was planning to walk the Ridgeway next spring, but I thought, you know what? Can't travel internationally, let's travel domestically. And I did that, and I updated my book, still working on it, hope to release it next year. But that was great. I'm really pleased with myself for being flexible like that. So celebrate your wins, even if it's small, even if it's big, even if you think, oh, it's not that big a deal. Make a list. And then, I don't know, have a glass of wine, have a glass of sparkling wine, have a special meal, something. Do something special to celebrate your successes. Again, even if it's just surviving the year. It's been a rough year. Next, stop comparing yourself to others. I have an episode on how to quit the comparison game for good. That might be useful if you have an issue with comparing yourself to others. That's definitely been a problem for me in my life, and I realized that it's not something I do anymore. I mean, yeah, every once in a while I might think, oh, I feel bad at myself because so-and-so is doing this and I'm only doing that. But it doesn't have the emotional charge that it used to. I don't cling to it, and I can kind of let go of it. So I might have that thought and then it just kind of leaves. Whereas before it was something that really kind of plagued my thoughts and I would kind of dwell on it. So just keep your eyes on your own lane. So with running, I got back into running this year and I'm really into trail running and I'm a slow runner. But I don't compare myself to others. I don't compare myself to other people's times. I keep my eyes on my lane. I put in the miles, I run them, and I'm slowly and surely increasing my distance every week. So I'm just kind of doing my thing, I'm improving at it, and I'm comparing myself to where I was last week, where I was last month. And I find that really useful. So if you find yourself comparing yourself to others, listen to that episode, which I will link to in the show notes, but just remember, stop looking at what other people are doing and keep your eyes on your own lane. Imagine if you were running a race, maybe not a trail race, but a race on a track where you're kind of all in different lanes and you can see the other people next to you. But instead of running in your lane and keeping your eyes on your lane, you're constantly looking. You're looking ahead at some woman who just passed you and you're looking behind you and you're looking at the people next to you on both sides. Where are they? Where are you in relation to them? That's going to slow you down and it's going to make you feel like shit. So just keep your eyes on your own lane, put one foot in front of the other, literally and figuratively, and just keep going. Keep improving within your own parameters. Keep improving compared to what you did last week or the week before or the month before or the year before. But stop looking at what other people are doing because it's a recipe for unhappiness. And remember, there's no failure, only feedback. And that's another NLP presupposition that I really, really like. So learn from any mistakes. Think about what you'd rather do instead if the situation arises again, and realize that was a learning opportunity, and then move on. And I think this is really, 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 really important. Yes, you could have handled the year differently, but what have you learned from how you handled it? What have you learned from the decisions you made? What have you learned about the things you did? And what would you like to do differently next year? Learn from it. And don't beat yourself up over it. Remember that there's no failure, only feedback. Redefine success. So things are still uncertain as we move into 2021. Yes, there's a vaccine, people are getting it, but life is still weird. Things probably getting canceled for me. In January, I had 2 courses that were outdoors courses. I think they're probably not going to be able to go ahead, but we're not sure yet. So we're still in that weird limbo of, can we or can't we? And because the tiers are changing on a weekly basis, almost here in the UK, it's impossible to know what's going to be happening 3 weeks from now or 2 weeks from now. So we still have uncertainty as we move into 2021. So success in 2020 or 2021, probably not going to look like what it did in 2019 or what you thought success would look like back in 2019 before this coronavirus happened. So make plans and be flexible with them. Have a plan B, C, D, E, F. Have a menu of options if your primary choice doesn't work out. So if you wanted to travel abroad, travel domestically. I mean, when my Camino was canceled in March, just as everything was just kind of exploding with COVID, I spent a couple of days thinking, what the hell am I going to do? And I felt depressed and sad, and I was mourning the loss of my walk because it wasn't just a walk. I was also going to write a book about it, and it was like a big thing. And I'd been wanting to do the Camino since 1996, I think. And I stopped, I reevaluated, and then I went on that fantastic camping trip here in the UK. So have a plan B and C and D. And that camping trip was such a lovely trip. It keeps popping into my thoughts because I had such a good time and I want to do a different version of that perhaps next year. But it was absolutely lovely, and it was such a delightful plan B that honestly, I felt perfectly fine about having missed the Camino. And I'm perfectly fine about having to wait until 2022 or beyond to do it because I had such a great time with my plan B. So make a whole menu of options. When you're making your plans, come up with other alternative plans as well. So maybe I won't be able to do my courses that I've got planned for January. It's 2 weekends. And if we're so locked down that we can't do those courses, I probably won't be able to do a workation outside of the home, but maybe I can do a workation at home. That would be weird. It hasn't worked for me in the past, but give it a try. Or maybe I can just have a great outdoors weekend where I can go running and plan some other kind of adventure. So I can't be outdoors to do the trailing course, but I could go for a long run, maybe with my husband or alone. So have options. Make plans and be flexible with them. And realize that you may have to be flexible with a lot of your plans next year because we don't know what's happening. And finally, gratitude. So I know a lot of people don't like making gratitude lists. I don't think this is something that you need to do every day, which I think is what a lot of people rebel at, but it can be really helpful to just be grateful for all that you have and all that you have done. Again, even if it's just, within air quotes, surviving 2020. So maybe take a page in your journal and write down 10 things that you're grateful for. I am super grateful for having walked the Ridgeway this year. I'm super grateful for having had that opportunity to do the camping trip. I am super grateful that I was able to stay on track with some of my publishing calendar, adjust the rest of it, and I published pretty much a book a month this year. I think it was 12, but it might be more. Just last week, or was it early this week, I published the final book in my business mindset series, Business Intuition. Super proud of having completed that project, of updating the books to second editions. Could they have been better? Stuff could always be better, but it's good. It's so much better than the first edition, which was also good. I had such great feedback from that book. So be grateful for all that you have done. Be grateful for all the adventures that you've had, even if they were small adventures, even if it was just you went for a run or a walk in your local area, when really what you wanted to do was travel abroad and have adventures abroad. Be grateful for all that you could do. Be grateful for all the travel that you could do this year, even if it was just to a local park or a local something. And think about how you want to redefine travel and adventure for 2021. So maybe you will feel safe engaging in international travel. Maybe you won't. Maybe it will be possible. Maybe it won't. So make, again, different versions of your plans and adventures and travels, and be grateful for the opportunities that you do have. Even if you have to keep it really close to home, make a list of adventures and places that you can go to really close to home and use those as your plan B or C. And be grateful that you have those opportunities, because no matter where you live, there's somewhere you can go. Some people live in kind of more natural areas than others. Some people live in big cities. But even if you live in a major city, you can go to a park, you can walk around. So there's always some kind of adventure you can have, even if it's just outside your door. So to wrap up this episode, I just wanted to remind you of some of the things you can do to give yourself credit. Be kind to yourself. Know that you are good enough. Celebrate your wins. Keep your eyes on your own lane. Remember, there's no failure, only feedback. Redefine success, redefine adventure, redefine travel, and practice gratitude. If you try any of these things, please drop me a line and let me know what you thought about this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollyworton.com or find me online and get in touch there. Thank you so much for listening. A very happy New Year to you. A very happy 21. Next week, I will be talking about how to plan the year that you want, again, with plan A, B, C, D, E. And that's all for now. Remember to visit hollyworton.com/388 for the show notes on this episode. And again, Happy New Year. You survived, you're here, and we have a new year. It's super exciting. Thank you again. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.